Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Thrive After Sports podcast. If you were joining us on Author Spotlight, we appreciate you being here with us as well. We have a very special guest in the building today. I'm joined by Mr. Christopher M. Houston, the author of Male to Man to Mentor. You see, I got it right here. The subtitle is Perfecting Manhood by Cultivating Legacy, and we're definitely going to dive into that today. I want to preface this before we dive in for the listeners. We're going to be talking about manhood today, right? Now, I know a lot of women tune into the show, so that doesn't mean this episode is not for you. There's going to be tremendous value that Mr. Houston is going to share with us. So I want you to share this episode with, your sons, your brothers, your husbands, your significant others. Make sure the message gets around because this is going to be one for the books, folks. No pun intended with the book right here. So before we dive in, Christopher, first of all, thank you for being here. And if you wouldn't mind, please just let everybody know a little bit of your background before we dive into the discussion today, sir.
Well, Taj, before I say anything about myself, I want to just say, man, it's great to have had the invitation and to have met you. I think we met via Clubhouse and had the privilege of connecting. And I knew immediately, man, I got to find out who this guy is and what this guy is about, man. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to be on your podcast here today. I'm Christopher M. Houston. I am the author of Male to Man to Mentor. I'm also a father of four. Well, I guess I can call them adult children here now because my last one just left out going to college. So my wife and I are empty nesters. I'm also a pastor. Have pastored a church back in North Carolina where I started back in 2007. I've since turned it over to my spiritual son who is now pastoring that church. So I'm founder and overseer of Bridge of Life Community Fellowship Church. I'm the founder of Bridge of Life Ministries. I am a chaplain, federal prison chaplain. I've worked in the federal prison system for over 17 years, worked in prisons over 20. Working with juveniles first and then working with men. But I'm a graduate of Oral Roberts University and, just kind of a jack of all trades when it comes to ministry-based stuff, doing a lot of inspirational speaking, sharing thoughts and ideas, challenging men on every level, whether it's corporate, whether it's in the church, spiritually, or what have you. You'll find me doing the work of men. And so this is a passion of mine. I'm glad that, this is our topic here today because we can talk for hours, which I know we don't have that much time, but I'm looking forward to our conversation. Thank you for the invite.
Yes, sir. It's a pleasure to have you here. And we, like you said, we can easily keep this going for hours. As you mentioned, we did connect on Clubhouse. Shout out to the power of Clubhouse for so many great connections. Yes. And as soon as, and the feeling is mutual because as soon as you started sharing what was on your heart, your mission, about everything you're doing for men and young men specifically and teaching older men to raise up younger men, I was like, this is something that needs to be spread. We need to talk about this. So I'm going to get out of the way. I'm going to let you do your thing. I might have a couple questions along the way. As I mentioned, I just finished reading the book. We will talk about where you can grab this book at the end of this episode. So everybody stay tuned. But I want to preface it with this before we dive in. Anybody tuning in on Author Spotlight, first and foremost, I want you guys to listen to Mr. Houston's story, why he decided to write the book, what drove him to be able to help spread his mission in the form of a book. And for anybody on Thrive After Sports, we're dealing with a lot of athletes I've coached. A lot of men specifically have issues with opening up, being vulnerable. And as Mr. Houston will get into, I'm sure being vulnerable and opening up and allowing someone to help you is where the healing takes place. You can't have healing in isolation. So with that being said, I just wanted to start it off with this. Like I said, I'm going to let you do your thing, sir. But Male to Man to Mentor, why the title? Can you just break down a little bit what that means and so people know what to expect from the book?
I really love the title, and not just because it's my book, but I think that it's the, if you will, the culmination of years of my own searching. Okay. In fact, it's amazing how we become oftentimes experts in the areas where we lack the most and had the greatest need in our process. So Male to Man to Mentor is what you call the progression of manhood. When I began to look at manhood, I had heard, I've been, if you will, just kind of mentored through teachings, research, over the years in regards to dealing with males and the difference between what a male is and what a man is, and how do you define the two and things of that nature. And I've always loved that, and I've always gravitated to that as a definition. But as I began to do my research, and tie in things that that I believe are extremely important to my life personally, which is my spiritual life. I began to look at the Bible. I began to look at the Word of God. I began to realize that there is more to just being a man, that anybody can become a man, but can you then reproduce one, which is where the progression of manhood comes in. So maleness, I call it the freebie. In other words, we didn't do anything for it. Okay, it just kind of happened, right? And so you can live your life with what I call the free card, right? You can live your life, what I call playing with your maleness, playing with all the attributes that come freely, that literally, Taj, you didn't have to you didn't have to work hard to get stronger. You didn't have to work hard for your voice to grow a little bit deeper. You know how we answer the phone whenever we, get about 14, 15 years old, right? That voice drops a little bit. You didn't have to do anything for that. The ability to procreate, right? Oftentimes when I'm in the man cave workshop, one of the things I like to tell the men is I say, fellas, listen, when we turned 13, some of us a little bit earlier, we all woke up the same way. You know what I'm talking about? You didn't do nothing for that. That's free. That's a part of maleness. It just happens. What I learned, though, and what I was challenged with both in my research as well as in my experience, is that manhood doesn't come as easily. It's not as natural in that regard. That there has to be something that you activate in order for manhood. So in the book, I define manhood in a way that I think is quite unique, but I think accurate and probably in line and in sync with a lot of your research, is that manhood then becomes a conscious awareness of why you have what you've been given freely. It becomes men who are woke, if you will, right? You become a man who understands why you were given what you were given freely and how to appropriate via responsibility. One of the quotes I have in the book, Taj, is I oftentimes say, you must plant the seed of maleness in order to produce the fruit of manhood. And so it's in responsibility. It's when I embrace the responsibility of having a family. It's when I embrace the responsibility of working 9 to 5, right? It's when I embrace the responsibilities of life that I then can grow an awareness of why I'm built and designed the way I am. So manhood doesn't become some metaphysical thing that we oftentimes think of. It really becomes a consciousness, an awareness that, hey, you know what? There's a purpose and there's a reason why I'm built and designed the way I am. I'm not just competitive to be competitive. We talk about the sports, right? I'm competitive because I need to be so as the head of my home. I need to be so as a man who is willing to fight for this family and ensure that we're going to have the best possible outcome that we can have as a family. I need to be a man who is strong because I am a protector of my home. Come on. And so I put it in perspective because I've embraced responsibility and I'm not just pushing out weights, right? Okay, to build strong muscles. What I'm doing now is I'm lifting the weight called marriage. Hello. I'm lifting the weight called fatherhood. I'm lifting the weights. You see what I'm saying? I'm lifting responsibility. And I believe that men grow strong, that they become true men when they're conscious and aware of why they have what they have. Mentorship is the last part of it. Talk about the title of the book. Mentorship then becomes the responsibility of woke men, of men who are aware and alert and understand who they are. That once you become that, how do you reproduce that in the lives of others? It's one thing for me to become a man. It's another thing for me to reproduce one. My greatest challenge has been trying to see that happen in both my ministry as well as my own personal life and raising my children, things of that nature. It's harder to convince someone else to reproduce you.
Come on now. We got a pastor in the building, folks. We got you didn't know when you click play on this episode that y'all are going to be taking to church. You didn't know it. You didn't know it, but you know now. That's phenomenal. And I love the way you clearly outlined the steps just now, but in the book as well. And basically what I'm hearing you say is that, being born a male, that's not a choice. You came out the womb that way. And you talked about embracing the responsibility that is manhood. So I don't want to get too deep into, we won't talk about what's going on in the world right now. We may or may not get there, but I just wanted to ask you a very simple question. And that is, how does one go about embracing that, right? Because like you said, it's a choice. It is a choice to become a man. You have to embrace that responsibility. Someone may be listening and being like, why would I want to do that? Why would I embrace responsibility? So can you just explain to us how do you do it? And why do we need to, as men, go from male to manhood before we even get to the mentor stage?
Well, the importance of it is, I think in order to understand the need to get to manhood authentically, I believe it's a matter of redefining manhood for a lot of men. Okay, so how do you get there? Is first you got to have the proper definition. You got to understand that manhood may not have been what the dudes out on the stoop. Come on, you know what I'm talking about? The guys out on the corner told you was manhood. You feel me?
Right.
See, the reality is, I talk about in the book. I have a section in the book called "Walking with the Lean." All right, and so when I'm in workshop, I'm oftentimes I go back to my dudes back in the 70s, right? How dudes back in the 70s, you can't see this hand down here, leaning to the side as I walk, right? Dudes were cool with it. Here's what I understood. I use it as an example in the book because I explain that there is nothing natural about walking sideways. Are you feeling me? It's actually quite dysfunctional. Here's the problem. What we've done in society is we've popularized our dysfunctions. If we can get enough people to misdefine manhood, are you feeling me? If we can get enough men to agree that this is what being a man really is, this is what it, but have no full basis for how it works in making better what God put in our hands to be stewards over. So if he puts this world in our hands, are we making it better? See, that definition won't support making anything better. All it's going to do is tear stuff down. So I call that misguided manhood. Here's how you define misguided manhood. A man who's smooth enough to dodge responsibility and hard enough to reject accountability. So what happens, Taj, is here's what happens. He's smooth enough to dodge responsibility. That way, so when he sees Shorty, come on, his whole game is to work to get Shorty without having to commit to Shorty. So I work to get the result, but I don't want the commit. Here's that in action again. I want the ends of 9 to 5, but you ain't gonna see me from 9 to 5. Are you with me? So the spirit of what I call the Mac Daddy, if you will, or that playboy mentality or misguided manhood definition that we've grown up with often, first of all, has to reject responsibility. And that is the game itself, to dodge responsibility. Okay. The second part is you have to be hard enough to reject accountability. And so therefore, when somebody wants to, when Taj Dashaun wants to step to you and say, hey, bro, check this out. I want to just holler at you real quick. About, why are you stepping to me? Why you want to talk to me? Why are you all up in my business? Right? So the whole idea of rejecting anyone holding you accountable for your behavior or trying to sow into you and let you make you aware that your definition of what you think is going to make you successful, what you think is going to make you a man, or what you think is going to be overall beneficial for you in the end, is really a dysfunction that you've popularized. And so before we get to male to man, we got to first of all identify where we've misdefined manhood. And that's what the book approaches, is it tries to identify a definition for manhood that helps you understand how it compares in light to what we've grown accustomed to. And many of our images portrayed on TV and media or what have you, that is not what manhood is. But yet, if you talk to the populace of society, they'll say that's manhood.
Wow. So good. It's funny, Christopher, because I'm not sure if I shared this with you, but I turned 30 earlier this year in April. And I do not claim to have it all figured out, but I feel like this is the year where I'm finally learning to embrace everything that you're talking about. And I'm seeing it in my life, and I'm more aware of it, and I'm able to act accordingly now that this type of information is on my radar, right? Especially as I'm reading your book, I'm nodding the whole time like, yes, okay, that makes a lot of sense. And for so long, I may have thought I was a man. You know, we both played college ball. So, you feel like a man, you feel tough. But when it's all said and done, are you embracing the responsibility of a man, or are you rejecting the responsibility, like you were saying, and being too hard for the accountability factor? And for so long, as I look back over my life, especially early 20s, of course, which is usually when that shift starts to happen. But I don't feel like until I turned 30 is when I actually started to wake up a little bit and be like, okay, that's all being a man is embracing responsibility and taking accountability for those things. And then eventually, leading into mentorship. Can you share, because I think this would really help drive the point home. Can you share from personal experience in your own life, what was the transition for you like going from male to manhood?
Yeah. So I like many men, spent the first portion of my life kind of guessing, what I call guessing my way. All right. In other words, it's almost like, if you will, Taj, looking into a mirror. When I look into a mirror, I can see, okay, I've got these buttons are buttoned appropriately. At least I think they are. Yeah, these buttons are buttoned. Okay, so I'm looking in the mirror. I can see that this lines up right. If I had hair, I would be able to tell if my hair is out of alignment or whatever the situation is. Flip that mirror over where there's no reflection, and now I'm left to guess. Okay, I felt like probably the first portion of my life, while I did not have consistently my father in my life. I did have my grandfather, I had my uncle, I had eventually I had a stepfather who came into the picture. I was able to draw and glean from, but I had no one that actually set me down and began to tell me this is what it is to be a man. I had some demonstrations, and I was gleaning off of whatever was closest to me that I could pick from, that I can draw from. And I did that, and I want to say that I was in a fairly good environment to do that, because I had a grandfather who helped raise me that was a good man and took care of me as best he knew how. Okay. What the challenge was is I never had conversation, instruction. I never had it defined. And so when it came to defining it, it seemed like influences outside the home were far greater in defining manhood for me, because they would say, in order to be a man, it's the sexual prowess. In order to be a man, it's the athletic, accomplishments or what have you. In order to be the man, it's the financial display, of whatever you have. And so those things became more of an influence initially. However, I had enough of a foundation in the church to be able to have a desire to seek God's definition for manhood. And it started around 14. And after I gave my life to Christ at 14, I began to really look into things that gave me more of a sense of what God's definition might be of manhood. I didn't read until I got saved. I didn't like reading, like most young men who are in sports, athletics, or what have you. They may not necessarily like reading as much because it doesn't come with the applause that we're used to, However, as I began to read, as I began to get to know God for myself, I then wanted to represent him. So I became a member of Fellowship of Christian Athletes. It put me around other Christian men who were in the same area of athletics and, but had faith, and showed me and displayed how to mix faith with my athletics in a place that's quite, alternative in many accounts, right? So I began to draw from that, benefit from that, and it helped me define. Here's what I learned, though, Taj. All the research, all the examples, and by the time I got married in my early to mid 20s, I still didn't fully have a definition of manhood. And so it's been a lifelong kind of journey for me, which is why this book kind of culminates. When I got the revelation that it was a conscious awareness, and it was not dodging responsibility, but embracing them. When I embraced marriage, I became more aware of who I was as a man. A year after being married, I had my first child. I embraced that wholeheartedly. I didn't run from it. I didn't dodge it. I put it in the context where I felt God would be proud that it was in marriage that we had our child. And it worked that I began to then become aware of who I was as a man and what that responsibility was and how it fit. And so I became teachable, a lifelong learner, if you will, of who I am as a man. And it's grown with me. And I had a wife who was patient enough that in some of my still yet immature stages in the early parts of our marriage was patient enough to wait for me, to grow up. Are you hearing me?
Yes, sir.
So you can have the desire to become a man, and you can have a desire, but you got to know that it takes time. Okay. And so men want to, because they have a certain clout in the community via their social connections. They want to claim manhood so early, but haven't yet had the first sense of responsibility in their life to know how to really manage it. And so that's where I think we're amiss, is that we think we are. And by the time we become 30, sometimes 40, sometimes 50 years old, and you realize in a man cave workshop, like I do behind prison walls with prisoners, is I challenge them in a way at 50 years of age that they've never been challenged before. And they finally come into something that helps them say, you know what, that's what it is. And I can now articulate it, I can now articulate it in a way that may be able to help somebody else. Sorry, that's the long version.
No, please don't apologize. This is all good. I love it. I love everything you're sharing. So please don't apologize for going in, because that actually leads me to what I wanted to ask you next. I think you did such a great job of outlining how what the definitions are, first of all, but how we make that transition into manhood. And so
yes.
I know you can't give it all away. People need to read the book to be able to really fully understand this, because there's a lot of things that there's not enough time in the world for us to cover everything in the book.
Taj, one thing I learned, I don't put everything in the book. There's something, look, you still need Christopher Houston to tie some of those ends together. So I'm just letting you know, that's just a little marketing piece there for you. So
that's right. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And then as far as in your workshops, I think this would be good too, because like I said, I didn't really know. I think there's maybe a switch to happen, or just maybe me being more aware of myself. But to those young men listening, because I know it was the case for me, it's like you don't know what you don't know, right? So I thought I was being a man, or what my definition of a man was. What are some things that you share in your workshops, or just, if you're working with someone one-on-one, that can kind of jolt someone to wake up and be like, oh, I didn't think about that. That can help them be aware and put it on their radar so they can do something about it and start implementing those changes.
Perfect. In fact, you actually just stole really kind of what my leave people with idea, but nonetheless, here's you hit it right on the head. A man can only do what he knows to do. Okay. In the book, I have what's called the IOD model: information, operation, destination. Information is what you know. Operation is how you apply what you know, okay, or your doing phase. And then destination is not an ending point, it's a beginning point. It's how you live out the majority of your life. It's the living portion. It's the quality of life stage, the destination, right? So what I've learned is this right here. In most times, and I think the best way to put it is this, when you begin to talk about being a husband, and as a pastor, I've counseled many men in preparation for marriage, right? So when you begin to do that, the first thing we assume is that because he's old enough, because he looks the part, that he knows how to do it. Mm-hmm. When the reality is actually opposite that. You can look like it, you can be old enough to do it. And the sad part and the lonely part is that often you are afraid to share, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to be committed to one woman. I don't know how to raise this child. Maybe I haven't carried a job, for any length of time. I don't really know how to do. So admitting that after you look the part is very difficult for men. So here's what I propose in the book is, and this very good book for women as well. I just had one of the greatest compliments from a woman who picked up my book, was reading it in a public area. I'm not sure where it was. She was out somewhere and was reading it. And the number of women that approached her about the book because of its title and why she was reading it intrigued them and made them interested in Male to Man to Mentor. And so she said, Mr. Houston, your greatest advertisement for your book is women. and basically, here's the thing. What I challenge men and women with is to look at, don't just assume a person knows. My theory is I always assume you don't know. I always start with information. When I'm doing mentoring, when I'm sharing with young men, I don't assume you know it. I assume you don't know, and I start with information because that is where the investment is, right? I use this kind of really weird example. If I were to ask Taj to get together and let's build a Taj, I need you to build me a church, right? Taj's like, okay, well, I don't know where to start on building no church. That's Houston, right? But the reality is you may not know how to do it right now because you lack the information. But as resourceful as you are, you know how to get the information and could probably get it done. Mm-hmm. So information increases your ability to operate. Mm-hmm. So it is with men. So it is with marriage. So it is with being a father. So it is with being successful in business or what have you. You have to be willing to say, I only know this much. And as long as I only know this much right here, I'm raising children out of this much information. I'm trying to be successful as a man out of this much information. I'm trying to be a good husband out of this. And you grow weary because you have not invested any more in your information, which is why I'm a proponent for spiritual faith. Because when I got saved, the first thing I did was I began to tap into a book of wisdom and knowledge. And man, I'm not the smartest cat at all. But man, I got hold of some wisdom, brother. And let me tell you, what it does, Taj, is it puts me in a place to where my information, has increased exponentially. It has grown tremendously. I might not be the smartest cat, Taj, but I look and sound so much more aware and alert because I put in the work to build the information that I need so that I function at a higher level, more efficiently. 24 years of marriage, hey, my wife and I got married after 6 months. We met and married in 6 months' time, my brother.
Wow.
And it took the first probably 15 years, she'd probably tell you, of me growing up and becoming a more mature man and gaining more information and gaining more experience before she could see the man that she experiences today. It's a lifelong thing. And information is where we have the right to invest, which is why mentorship is so important. Because I don't assume you know. I'm through trying to just correct what people are doing, because that's ill-served. Because I'm trying to get you to pull your pants up, but I haven't put any information in. You see what I'm saying? I'm trying to get you to do I'm trying to get you to commit to one wife, but I haven't changed your definition yet. You see what I'm saying? I haven't challenged that definition you have of what man is. I haven't assessed where your values are to even know that you could sustain, you know what I'm saying, at a certain level. And so mentorship becomes important because we hang out at the area of information and we sow into men so the information bank increases, and that we challenge those ill-defined definitions and perspectives and ideas, and we challenge men to actually adopt something that's going to benefit them and everything else that they touch around. So,
wow. And I love how you actually led me to what I wanted to talk about next. When you talk about, it's not just about them, it's about everyone around them. And so I love that your book isn't just called Male to Man. You're essentially saying that embracing manhood, embracing those responsibilities, becoming a man is only the beginning of the journey, so that you can become a mentor. And that's the pinnacle of manhood, is when you can bring other men up. So, and that's one of the things I appreciated about it the most when we first met on Clubhouse. And as I'm reading your book, I love that you didn't just leave it at that. Okay, it's not just, this is how you become a man. It's no. You're becoming a man so you can become a mentor. Yeah. So can you just talk a little bit about that? Why don't we start with your personal journey of that? Because you said it took some time. Your wife was patient with you. You eventually grew into the man that we see before us today, and then you became a mentor. Can you talk a little bit about that transition?
Let me say, it probably started as a pastor, because when you begin to talk about mentorship, you have to understand, in the book, one of the things I reveal is that you can't get away from mentorship. If you're a Christian believer, if you're a godly man, you can't get away from mentorship. Why? Because it's synonymous with discipleship. So as I began to disciple men, it became apparent mentorship, discipleship were synonymous. And the responsibility that I had both in the church, spiritually, to disciple men and women, was a responsibility I had as a man to disciple and mentor other males if they were going to be successful in becoming men themselves. And so one of the things I point out in the book is about the story of Abraham. Throughout the Old Testament, they oftentimes reference and refer to Abraham, but you hear them also refer to his generations. So you hear the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? So you hear that. And what's unique about it is God is they're calling out his generations. And so I began to look at this whole idea. What is the importance of not just calling Abraham's name, but calling out the generations that follow after him? Because here's what I realized, Taj, and the need for mentorship is not just a casual, shallow need. It's a very deep need that men have, period, because it is your generations that crown you successful, not you yourself. In other words, no man gets the crown. Yeah, you can have the houses, you can have the cars, you can have the money, but is there a generation that will rise up and call you blessed? You see what I'm saying? And so it pointed out something to me. And here's the powerful part. Watch this. Whether you're a coach in sports, whether you're a pastor, whether you're a father, whether you're a deacon in your community, whether you're a serviceman in some capacity, or just an average Joe, you have the need to know that your life is being effective, not just in your generation, but in the generations that follow after you. It's sad, but a lot of times, what you're coming into at 30, some men don't get until they're 60, 70 years of age. And it's then where they're really starting to try to pour into the younger generation and do this and do that. Man, we're supposed to live our lives doing that. Because that generation, man, is supposed to are the ones that crown our success. And I tell the men when I'm doing workshops, I said, fellas, listen, when I'm teaching this hard, I'm not just teaching because I love teaching. I'm doing it because I need you to receive what I got. Let me explain it. Here's what happens. Abraham takes his son up to the altar. We know this real popular story in the Bible, right? He offers his son Isaac on the altar. They say, was Abraham's faith, watch this real quick, was Abraham's faith not perfected when he offered his son Isaac on an altar? So the Bible says that Abraham's faith was perfected when he offered his son Isaac on the altar. I began to research that word perfect, okay, back when I was at Oral Roberts University. And it's the word teleos, okay? The root of that word, teleos, means complete, right? But the root of that word is telos, okay, which they use the word consummate to describe. Here's what's unique about it. What one believes, okay, faith, has to marry what one practices, work, become intimate, and the result of intimacy is reduplication.
Wow.
So when I put to work what I do, come on, with what I believe, what I'm trying to do is reproduce it in Taj, an understanding of male to man to mentor, right? So here's why his faith was perfected, because his son came down from the mountaintop with his father's faith.
Wow. You are a true scholar, sir. You are a biblical scholar.
I'm far from being a scholar, but I know I've increased my knowledge to embrace enough to talk about manhood at this particular level. So you want to talk to me about something else? I don't know very much about it. But this right here, I do know, Taj. This right here, I do understand that I've had a need long ago to now, and will have until my aging days, to reproduce what I've become. And until a man can see what he's become in someone else, reproduce, come on, there's no guarantee that generation will crown him successful. So my greatest challenge personally was my son, and working with my son, and because I'm raising me, Taj. Right. I was raising me, dude. And I can see the end coming long before it gets there. And I'm screaming, man, you got to do this, man, but then I had to stop. And I've had a wife who's a therapist. It helps having a mental health professional in the marital union, because I get free counseling all the time. But the reality is, she has helped me, based upon how she experiences me, know how to deal with him. So I had not just become teachable to some book, right? I had, and not just to the Bible. I had to become teachable to other people in my life who experience me as a man. And when my wife tells me that everybody in the household, when my voice goes above a certain level, it affects the entire household. It takes her to say, listen, watch your tone with it, because it affects everybody in the house. Man, I'm like, okay. You know what I'm saying? I'll wait till I get with Taj before we go up, another couple of decimals. You feel me? Which is probably why I preach so hard whenever I get in the pulpit, because I've been waiting to get it out, Taj. But the reality is, I've learned from the people who experience me as a man, and I'm constantly making adjustments, come on, so I can be a more effective mentor, right? So that's what I've got there.
You know what? I got to start calling you Pastor Houston. Just out of respect. I've been calling you Christopher this whole time. Just need to put some respect on your name and call you Pastor Houston. But I just want to say, first of all, I wish we had more time, because we would definitely have to have you back on so we could dive. We have barely even just scratched the surface of what's in this book and what's on your heart. But before we do close out, I just want to say thank you, number one, for what you've brought to the show today. I think that this is a needed message. And like I said at the beginning, I want people to share this and spread this around, especially if you're a woman, listen to this. If you're a man, share this with your brother, share this with other people so they can receive this message that Pastor Houston is giving us today. And I don't even have any follow-up questions. Is there anything else on your heart that you want to share, Pastor Houston, before we wrap up? Anything that you feel called to share with us while we have this time together?
I would say this. Men, if you're listening to this, get this book and don't assume that you know everything there is about manhood. And I'm not saying it's all in this book, but I'm saying that I will challenge you in this book. I would challenge your definition. Okay. And I want you to put your definition of manhood up against what I'm putting in this, what I've put in Male to Man to Mentor, because I believe it is that kind of mental exercise that is going to help make us better men. I don't care what your religion is. I've taught Male to Man to Mentor to Muslims, to atheists, to Jewish men, to Hindus. All of them have come to my workshop when I was working behind prison walls, and I strip it sometimes of all of the in-depth theological stuff, but I to ensure that men receive the concept and the understanding of where they are and what work they need to put forth. Don't assume you know. That's anything I can say. Don't assume you know. You might be 50, you might be 60, 70 years old, or you might just be 14 listening for the first time, and this sparks your first thoughts and ideas about trying to define manhood. I want to challenge you. Take this book. Let it be a guide with you. There's a lot of really good stuff in there. I do a lot of illustrations. I do a lot of, as a pastor, I put a lot of my illustrated kind of sermon type technique inside of this book so that it can become practical immediately. There is in there an actual character chart, because I talk about character, the importance of character, and we break down the full aspect of what character is, and how do you break it down to know how do you develop your character. You can take that one element along in the book, and you can spend an entire year trying to build your character. So get the book.
Yes, sir. And with that being said, how can people grab a copy of the book? How can they learn more about the workshops? How can they get in touch with you, follow your journey on social media, all of that, please?
Okay. Well, first of all, the book is only available on meletomantomentor.com at this particular point. The publisher that I had has now gone under. And so I'm no longer working with that publisher. So we're repackaging and rebranding the Male to Man to Mentor message into a second edition, possibly with some workbooks and things of that nature. However, meletomantomentor.com is the only place you're going to be able to get it. You can find me on social media: LinkedIn, Christopher M. Houston, Twitter, CM Houston 22, and then on Instagram, IMC Houston, TikTok, IMC Houston. You'll find me in all those places there. But get in contact with me. I'd love to do workshops in your area, no matter where you're at. Give me a call. I'm more effective working with you directly, being able to address some of your specific needs as men. And I don't have a problem getting dirty, okay? But we don't just open up wounds. We close them up before we leave. So understand it. Make it a little tough. We may have some challenge conversations, but I'm looking forward to working with you. Give me a call. chouston.bolcf@gmail.com is my email. Go to my social media pages and you'll get all the information.
Awesome. Everybody listening, make sure you tune in and make sure you get in touch with Pastor Houston and grab a copy of the book while supplies last. As he mentioned, we may be working on a relaunch soon with Self-Publishing 30 Days to get the revised edition, the new and improved edition.
All right. Come on now.
So we're excited about that. So
30 days. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Everybody make sure you get in touch. Pastor Houston, once again, thank you for your time today. We will definitely be having you back on the show. I'm just honored to have had this space for you to share. And I'm excited to listen back to the episode so I can get some more, make sure I pull everything out of this episode. And super grateful for you, super grateful for this connection, and just appreciate you. We'll be in touch very soon, as always.
Taj, it is an honor, man. Thank you so much. Appreciate you, brother.
Yes, sir. All right, everybody. This has been another great episode of Author Spotlight and Thrive After Sports with Mr. Christopher M. Houston. All of his information will be in the show notes. You can reach out and get in touch, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, Pastor Houston.
Bless you, man.